Because there's like a new can of worms, I'm like, kind of need to resolve that can of worms a little bit.
I just genuinely don't believe I have the strength or the ability or the skill to complete a project.
And I don't know if I want the chapter this long.
And when I figured that out, dude, that was such a revelation. So maybe the scene is actually fine, and I realized this chapter was all kinds of messed up.
Sorry, Harrison. Let me just ruin your life real quick for the plot.
Do you need an idol?
Do you want to see me finish my novel instead of going into an existential crisis every single time I open the document? Well, me too. And in this video, I'm going to try to accomplish that. You get to see the raw, uncut version of my chaotic writing process. The goal of today's vlog is to hopefully get me closer to finishing my novel, Feeding Habits, which is an adult literary fiction novel that I've been working on for over 2 years. If you didn't know, drafting this book has been a very difficult experience. Every step of the way has been really hard, and I recently posted a video where I was doing my makeup and basically talking about my struggles. So I won't repeat them in this video. I'll link that in the description if you'd like to check it out. But essentially in that video, I talked about how I know that I kind of veered off in the wrong direction and kind of messed up Feeding Habits. I was talking about how frustrating that was and how I cut 10,000 words of the manuscript, how I've been unable to progress past the 50,000 word mark without the book sort of collapsing in on itself. But I'm determined to finish this book. I am refusing to work on anything else besides this book for the next couple of weeks so that I can really get it in order. I started this book when I was 18 years old and I'm 20, and I really just want to finish it. It feels almost like dead weight of kind of like an old person that I used to be. I just feel so different from the 18-year-old first year version of me. I'm going into my 4th year of university. I'm graduating next year. I just really want to kind of move on from this project while also creating something that I enjoy. So what's the current state of Feeding Habits? Essentially, I'm working on redrafting chapter 7 of the book. So if you watch the makeup video where I talked about Feeding Habits, I discussed that I was happy with chapter 7, 8, and 9 of the book. And the truth is, I'm not. I'm not happy with chapter 7 at all. On a recent reread of the book, I kind of missed the fact that chapter 7 was a bit of a problem child, to say the least. So since yesterday, I've been working on sort of redrafting it and giving it a bit of new life, sort of expanding on and fleshing out a character arc that I'd kind of rushed through. Yesterday, I wrote about 1,700 words of the new fleshed out version of chapter 7. Essentially, everything will stay the same in terms of the events of that chapter, but I'm kind of switching the order around and also fleshing out the scenes quite a bit because I felt that they were a little bit underwritten or a bit rushed. I was missing a lot of the thematic meat for the chapter. So I see a squirrel walking up a tree, and you know, my childhood fear of squirrels is kind of kicking in. So I think I'm going to go inside and I'm going to get started on Feeding Habits. The squirrel went kind of somewhere over there, and I'm kind of like afraid to walk back inside. Wish me good luck. So the last couple of days have been some of the hardest on my confidence as a writer as of late. In the last few years, I'd say in the last 2 years, I've considered myself a really good writer. I don't feel like a novice anymore. I feel like I've come into my style. I've produced pretty excellent work for different things in different genres. I like my short fiction. I love my poetry. But the thing about being a confident writer, I think that I've realized over time is that it's just not a set in stone thing. It ebbs and it flows. Genuinely, the last couple of days have been really difficult. I haven't felt so kind of low or lost or confused about my writing in a number of years. I just genuinely don't believe I have the strength or the ability or the skill to complete a project. But I just don't want to shelve this project, and it genuinely could be the wrong decision that I'm making. It could be that I am making this decision purely out of not wanting to waste my time with a project. And a lot of it comes from that. Like, I don't want to quit on Feeding Habits, despite it being extremely difficult to write from the start, because I've put so much effort into it. And I'm not saying that's the right decision to make. It's just the decision that I'm currently making right now. But a couple of days ago, I was just like sitting, trying to figure out what to do with Feeding Habits, and I felt pretty low. I was like, this is a low point of this book because I knew it needed to change a lot. Cutting out 11,000 words of the manuscript was really difficult because essentially I cut out 2 chapters of the book that just were not working for the ending that Feeding Habits actually needed, in contrast to the ending I thought I needed to write. In the past, I've always been like, oh, you gotta do what's best for the project. Kill your darlings. No writing is wasted writing. Blah, 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 blah. And it's easy for me to say those things. I do think learning how to kind of let go of writing and write personally just for yourself, write no matter if you're unhappy with the product or not judge your writing too much. I think those are important skills to learn, but are they easy to learn and are they easy to actually implement in your process? I don't think so. And a couple days ago really tested me, I think, on that because I was genuinely struggling to accept the fact that I had wasted so much time on these words that I didn't really like or that I didn't need anymore, the project didn't need anymore, and I knew they would still live on in a Word document because I never delete my writing, I just put it in a separate document, but it felt sad. It felt like I needed to kind of grieve that writing a little bit. I know it seems a little bit ridiculous. Maybe it's because I wrote that 11,000 words that I cut out of the book in the summer of 2021. And if you didn't know, the summer of 2021, I think was probably the hardest time for a very different reason than I'd ever expected in my life. I was essentially at the beginning of what I now think was some really terrible autistic burnout. I didn't know I was autistic at the time. I found out I was autistic at the end of August of 2021. So I spent May, June, and July, and most of August just not knowing what to do with myself because I knew something wasn't, quite there. But at the same time, I was still pushing myself to write. And every single time I wrote something for Feeding Habits, it was a lot of effort. It was getting up and kind of really forcing myself to do it. And now we say it all the time, like, oh, sometimes you gotta write through the difficult spots. And I've been there. I'm a writing major, so sometimes I have to write when I don't want to write. But that was just next level in the summer of 2021. Just to kind of remove it, like 1/2 second movement is all that it takes to delete 4 months of progress. It was difficult. And I've been trying to remind myself that deleting the work is progress too. Just because the word count of the book goes down doesn't mean that I've taken a step back. I now know mostly kind of what I need to do with the book. So accepting that has been a bit of a dream, but I think I am on the other side of it because yesterday I had a great writing session. Fantastic doesn't mean easy. Let's get that out in the open. I was talking to my sister, and my sister has been in a couple of my videos. She does the podcast Double Spaced with me, which I'm trying to still get off the ground a little bit. She's also been a huge part of why I'm a writer, and she reads basically every single thing that I write, and she's a huge supporter of Fostered, which is the series that Feeding Habits comes from. This book wouldn't be a thing without her because she was the one who wanted me to continue writing it when I wasn't feeling it way back when I was 13. So I owe a lot to my sister, and I was talking to her yesterday about this book, and there was this level of just defeatedness in how I was talking to her. I felt so pessimistic about kind of the future of this project. I'd given her that advice of literally play by play going through and determining what your characters did from scene A to scene B, what actually happened. And so when we were talking about that, I was like, wait, I can apply that to Feeding Habits. I had done a bit of a quick reread of chapter 7, which is a chapter called Weeping Statue. I'll link the writing update in the description if you want to read some of Weeping Statue. There are a couple of excerpts. I'm not really fond of it now, but anyway, I had done a quick reread and I realized this chapter was all kinds of messed up. It might have been because it took me so long to write. Now, I can't remember how long Weeping Statue took me to write, but I know it was a long time because it was a disjointed chapter. I think it took me a couple of months to write that chapter. I'm not even sure I wrote that one in the summer. I can't remember. That's how long ago it was, and that's how long it took to write. I don't remember the process. When I gave her that advice, Sarah and I constantly have craft conversations that are just super nerdy, which is why I started the podcast, because I thought we should record some of them. I was like, oh, maybe I should take my own damn advice because it's kind of good advice. You know, it seems like no-brainer what happens next in your book. Like, it doesn't even seem like writing advice. Oh, just write what happens next. What I had failed to do at the end of chapter 6 was understand the sequence of events that led to the beginning of chapter 7. And it's not just laying them out, but really understanding the actions down to the most minuscule action, like a character walking somewhere. I had never considered that chapter 7 was the problem in Feeding Habits because I hadn't considered what happened between the end of chapter 6 and the start of chapter 7, which is a really important stretch of time because it signifies a transition of Harrison's mindset. I just hadn't thought of it that way. So I was talking it out with her and I was like, okay, so the final action Harrison makes at the end of chapter 6 is writing Lonan's name in the snow. And what happens after that? To figure that out, I kind of had to embody Harrison. So if I'm Harrison, I write my ex's name on the ground while a security guard who patrols the garden I've broken into with my friend, who I really only wanted to see because she's the sister of my ex, who I miss, has kind of abandoned me here. So if I'm Harrison, I would get up off the floor after writing his name. And then what would I do? Well, I'm thinking about him, so I'd want to go find some sort of remnant of him, right? And when I figured that out, dude, that was such a revelation. Harrison, more than anything, at the end of chapter 6, wants to reunite with Lonan. And so why wouldn't he do that at the beginning of chapter 7? Because he doesn't do that at the beginning of chapter 7. I glossed over that already. I started the next day where he has to deal with different conflict. Instead of finishing the conflict that he wanted to sort of see or meet back up with, which is impossible because Lonan's like across the country with Lonan. In general, I think as I'm talking to you, I realize that that is an issue in Feeding Habits, is that I have a lot of conflicts and they're great conflicts and I think they're complex and they're interesting, but I don't finish a lot of them. And then I move on to other ones that are complex and interesting and kind of forget about them or they get kind of washed on top of each other. When I realized that, it led me to thinking of a new scene of, okay, if I'm Harrison and I miss my ex and I want to go find him, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to a place that he would go to. So that's where the new chapter 7 starts, where Harrison goes to a church. So it was really interesting to draft this scene yesterday. Harrison essentially goes to a church at night. There's one other person in that church who he's trying to pretend his very best is Lonan, but he's not. He's very different and Harrison knows that, but does he care? And that's what kind of leads to the rest of the book. It's been really fun to write kind of with religion again. So a bit of context on me is that I'm not a religious person, but my entire life I went to Catholic school and majority of the themes in Mothwork are about religion in Lonan's point of view, and the themes in Feeding Habits, which Mothwork is the first book of Feeding Habits. It's the duology if you were confused. And Feeding Habits also deals with religion in Lonan's point of view. To be able to write about it again in the new chapter 7, which I'm going to still call Weeping Statue, it's going to work a lot better, the title, which if you didn't know, Weeping Statue is like a Christianity term, I believe. It's some statues, I think, of Mary and perhaps of Jesus, but I think it's mostly of Mother Mary, have been kind of seen crying. I think this new escapade to a church is going to tie in a lot of the themes that were not present in the original chapter. And for a chapter that is named like after like a religious term, you'd think there would be more religion in it. So yesterday I was having a lot of fun kind of revisiting Christianity a little bit. The first thing I noticed when I was revising the chapter yesterday, which includes drafting the new stuff, was how short it was. It was only 3,500 words. And the average chapter, I think, in Feeding Habits is about like 6,000 words long, 5,000 to 6,000 words long. So I knew that there was something wrong and I was like, this is what was wrong. I was missing this whole chunk and I'm excited to get started on it. So
Hey everyone, how's it going? So guess who didn't do anything that I said I would do? It's me. So the realistic thing about writing is that sometimes I make plans and they don't happen the way I want them to, or I don't get to document them for this channel in the way that I want to. So let's update from the last time I saw you. It's been a couple of days. I wasn't able to write Feeding Habits for the past couple of days since I filmed the intro to this video. In the last 2 days in particular, I did finally get to drafting. After Sarah and I had brainstormed for this scene idea for the new chapter 7, I set out to work and I started drafting it. it. And currently the chapter is about 7,000 words long. And now I want to write some more. So it is just about 3 o'clock, which means I have about 2 hours before I have an appointment I need to skip out to write. And I think I'm just going to focus on drafting. Really, my goal is kind of just to get past a current scene that I finished it yesterday, but I'm not sure if I'm super happy with it. I don't know if it's exactly how I pictured it would go, but I'm going to give it a reread first. It's a really important part of my process is just rereading the last thing that I wrote because I don't have a very good short-term memory. So I'm going to start with that, and then I'm just going to continue to draft. Really, I'm just trying to bulk up this chapter. The fact that it's about 7,000 words right now sounds a little bit more in line with the average chapter length for Feeding Habits. As I noted, this chapter was much shorter before. I added a lot more than I thought. So I wrote 3,300 words, almost 3,400 words in the last couple of days. I'd say it's been the last 2 days of work for this 3,400 words. So my bad, I thought I wrote much less. So maybe the scene is actually fine because I thought that maybe it was paced too quickly. Clearly not, because it's really long. So I'm going to give it a reread and then I'm just going to continue drafting. Really, that's the plan. I just have to get through this book, really. So on the reread, I know I need to be aware of a couple of things, but the main one is pacing, but it's really not about editing at this stage. Editing can come later. Really, at this point, I just want to read what I wrote, see if I like it, and see if there are any kind of major changes to be made. I always regret when I don't take my first impression notes while I'm reading. I feel like those are really valuable, like your gut instinct for the first time you reread something. I like to keep note of that so I'm aware of what my initial thoughts were, because after I reread it a couple of times and I'm thinking about it, sometimes those opinions can kind of fade away, or I can explain them away a little bit easier. So yeah, in a separate document or in the document itself, kind of noting, oh, this is just too quickly paced, or this is too slow, or this is not detailed enough in terms of the description. Description's also a big thing. I feel like this is going to sound strange because I think a lot of people probably know my writing style as being quite descriptive, but I don't feel like I describe enough. Something I forgot to note is that I'm not actually going to read this myself. I'm going to get Word to read it for me. As a neurodivergent writer, I've just realized I'm not gonna try to bother trying to read my work in silence and not reciting it out loud or anything. The audio component is pretty important for me, so I just get the text-to-speech feature on Word to read it for me, and I find I'm better able to immerse myself in the reading experience. Otherwise, reading is not very fun for me. Another tip that I have is for if you find that you're really critical of your first drafts, the audio thing might also be helpful. I think I gave this tip to somebody when I was replying to a comment, but I don't think I've mentioned it on my channel. Sometimes what I like to do is listen to the chapter like on a really quick speed, like on 2 times speed, for example, and then it'll just be too inconvenient to pause it every single time you don't like something. Update on how writing went. It's been a couple of hours. I don't even know how long it is at this point. I don't have my computer in front of me. I spent about 2 hours out here. It took me about like an hour to really finish the reread, which is kind of a lot longer than usual. In terms of the actual drafting process, I was almost done the scene. I thought I finished it, but I didn't. So I had to go and finish the scene. Thematically, I know it's messy. I think I just need to get somebody else to read it, or I just gotta let it sit for a little bit, or like write down what I meant with the theme, because it's a bit all over the place. It's not anything that I can't fix. Okay, I moved because the AC unit was being loud. The chapter that I've been working on is kind of tea-licious. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of religion. There was a lot of Bible quotes that I was Googling and kind of inserting into dialogue and making into dialogue. But anyway, it's been interesting to be able to use kind of topics that were more important to the book a few years ago. It's actually made me feel connected to like kind of the original vision I had for the book, because it's kind of resembling what it used to look like, you know, back when I was writing London's chapters, like chapter 5 of Feeding Habits, which is super religious. I feel like this chapter, which is chapter 7, which is called Weeping Statue, which is another religious thing, is quite linked to chapter 5. But that's the update for now. Hello! Let's update on how writing went, because boy, did it go! It went well. But anyway, yesterday, I had a fantastic writing day. It's kind of crazy how good it was. I wrote 4,400 words. I hit 11,000 words in this chapter. Like, this is the longest chapter I've ever written. You know, I'm not sure if it's gonna stay that long. I might end up having to like revise some things. I'm really excited to write. I wanted to go outside, but there's a heat wave in Toronto. So I don't know if I can. Anyway, I had a really great time writing this book. For the first time in a long time, I stayed up late writing it. So yesterday, my dad and I, we went out really fast to get some like drinks. It was like 11 o'clock and he's like, oh, do you want to go get some drinks? And I was like, yeah. And so it was just the two of us. We went and I got a tea and I came back and the vibes were just phenomenal while I was writing. So essentially I've been rewriting chapter 7 because it just is wrong. I realized the more that I read it, the more wrong I was to have written it in the first place. I vaguely recall, maybe there's like a vlog of me talking about it, but I vaguely recall knowing that it was wrong, like when I was writing it, but I didn't know what else to do, so I just kind of had to push through it, and this is kind of what happened. So originally chapter 7 started with Harrison getting up in the morning, going to go drop off this litter of kittens that he finds in his like apartment's wall to a mutual friend of his mother's, and his mom's not really talking to him. She's a little bit upset at him because he didn't come home the night previous, and they've already kind of talked about that. She in the past has had some issues with alcohol addiction, and so she's quite worried about him in general, and so he's not really doing well in terms of his mental health. He's quite depressed, so she's very distraught that he didn't come home. So they kind of have a short conversation after he drops the cats off. He gets a job basically fixing up the mutual friend's like farmhouse, essentially like to renovate it a little bit. So on his way back home from doing that, he stops into a convenience store, he buys a whole bunch of random stuff, and then goes to a beach, starts swimming during a storm. Then when he leaves that, he goes back to his apartment, and lo and behold, like a cruel like twist of fate, Lonan, who is his ex, is at his house. But I changed it quite a bit because it just wasn't right. I was missing a lot of Harrison's emotions. He was doing a lot of things, but there wasn't anything attached to it. So I started in a completely different place where, if chapter 6, which I talked about earlier in the vlog, ends with Harrison thinking about Lonan, like what is he gonna want to do? He's gonna want to go find Lonan. So I got him to go to a church. At the church, he meets a man named Kale. What I wrote yesterday is Harrison like ends up kind of meeting up with this mom and daughter, like just complete strangers that he meets. The mother like invites him over because I think she feels kind of bad for him. I wasn't sure if I really liked where I kind of ended that scene yesterday, so I'm interested to reread it. The chapter just derailed a little bit, like in a good way, but also in a way that makes my life a little bit difficult because I still need Harrison to bring the cats to this guy's house. So I'm gonna reread it, see what I can do. Because of that, like the chapter's really, really long, and I'm thinking that maybe I need to split it in half because this chapter ended up kind of opening up a can of worms that I didn't know really existed in this book. I was kind of surprised by a lot of Harrison's reactions. This is his like destructive chapter. I have written it that way on purpose because he kind of needs that for his art. Sorry, Harrison. Let me just ruin your life real quick for the plot. Because there's like a new can of worms, I'm like, kind of need to resolve that can of worms a little bit, and I don't know if I want the chapter this long, but it's gonna have to get longer because I have to write more in order to like stitch the old chapter and the new chapter together. I want to share a playlist of what I was writing to because it's vibes. So because this is a highly religious chapter, I was kind of gravitating toward like music that contemplates God or just sort of religious themes. But then I decided to just play my music library. I'm one of those people that doesn't use Spotify. I like to own my music, and I still have iTunes. And so I just like press play on my iTunes and like hundreds of songs will just shuffle randomly. And so the playlist was created for me, and I think it was kind of perfect. Lydia Wears a Cross by Julia Jacqueline, Will I Be in Your Dreams by the Nicholas Project, which is now Current Joys, Your Blood by Nothing But Thieves, All the Good Girls Go to Hell by Billie Eilish, Same Airport, Different Man by Julia Jacqueline, A Fire Love by Ed Sheeran, How by Daughter, No One Will Dance Part 1 by Current Joys, I'm Still Breathing by Katy Perry, and Don't Be Consumed by Current Joys. It's a bop. But I do have a couple of things to do. Yesterday, I had worked on an edit for a magazine. All of my short stories seem to be coming out at the exact same time, which means that I've been doing like edits for every single magazine. Like every week I have like a new story or like poem or something to edit for a magazine. So I finished the edits on The Party, which is coming out in the Malahat Review, and that was quite fun. I really enjoyed revisiting that story. I was like, this is so weird. Like I forgot. And of course, my story, Jasmine's Browsing Cuts, came out in the Puritan yesterday, and I was just thrilled. I love the Puritan. I've been wanting to be published in the Puritan since I was in high school, and to actually have it happen was just amazing. And the Puritan has these like great like moments in the story where they will do like quotes, like block quotes of like
like, I guess, important moments that they choose. And I was like, oh my god, like, I was so excited to see like the certain quotes that they picked. It was just so exciting for me. I've never like fangirled so much over this publication before. I'm just so excited about it. Hello. So what's the update on writing? Well, it's been a number of days since I filmed the last clip for this vlog, and I've actually been editing it probably because I've been avoiding finishing this chapter, which sounds strange considering where I started when I began filming this video. So way back when I pressed record on the first clip for this vlog, I was not feeling confident or like I really knew my project feeding habits. I felt stuck. I felt kind of hopeless. It's never gonna end up working out. And wow, has it been an experience looking back at those clips from the early days while I've been editing this video. So what's changed in all of this time? Sometimes being a writer isn't very glamorous. Sometimes there are just moments of pure hard work and dedication, and it's really, really difficult, but you still do it. And I think that that's kind of what has happened to me over the last couple of weeks working on chapter 7 of Feeding Habits, aka Weeping Statue. I started at a low point, didn't really know what I was doing, then it quickly kind of gained some momentum. But when I gained momentum, I was kind of nervous it would fade away. But thankfully I persisted, and I have managed to almost complete the chapter. So I'll continue to document my process of finishing this book, but I'm still really happy with the progress I made. So since I last talked to you, something I was struggling with that I mentioned in the other clips was not really knowing what to do now with some current information that was already in the original chapter because of things that had changed in the rewrite, and particularly what to do with this whole kittens fiasco. So I was talking to my sister about it. Quickly, I kind of figured out a solution, and that solution entailed getting a different character, aka Lonan, to bring the cats, because all I really needed was the kittens to basically get out of the book. And I was really happy with that idea because though I cut out the subplot where Harrison ends up like getting a job, I kind of needed to do that anyway because it never showed up ever again in the book, and it was one of those loose threads that kind of just disappeared. So I killed two birds with one stone with that one decision. So with that said, I had to go and delete all of the words that pertain to him dropping off the kittens and getting to know like his mom's mutual friend, and that cut like 2,000 words out of the chapter. So now the chapter's at about 9,400 words. I think with revisions, and I do have a tiny bit of a scene, aka like maybe 300, 400 words to add into the chapter, it'll be around 10,000 words, which means it'll be the longest chapter in the book, which is kind of crazy, but it doesn't feel that long to me. But basically in the span of this vlog, I was able to sort through this really difficult problem and basically complete it. I'll finish it in the next couple of days. I'm really confident on that. I started writing the scene where Harrison ends up going to the convenience store to go back home, and that scene's already written. I just needed to write a little bit of a transitional moment, and so I'm working on that, and then that's the last thing. And the next step would just be to like line edit it, but the rewrite of this chapter is done. And that leads the future, which is kind of scary because that means I need to finish the book. Originally, Feeding Habits had another Lonan section, and that section was called Swan Song. It was like the last chapter of the book, but I think I've decided like not to give him a chapter, and I'm essentially just going to continue off from a scene that I left off in the new chapter 9, which was called Initial Condition. Now we'll save that journey for another video, but I'm really pleased with what I was able to do with Feeding Habits. I've never felt like I've understood the project this much in a really long time. I think this is the first time where I felt at peace with the project. So that's the end of this vlog. I hope you enjoyed it. I think I went on quite a journey, and I feel like a different writer coming out of it on the other end. What are you working on? Let me know in the comments, but for now, I will see you in another video. Bye.